Recording on this. Kia ora, whānau. It is my pleasure to kick off this little fireside chat podcast with a brother from the awa, Rangitikei, from Ngati Rangi. Ngati Rangi whanganui tū whare tō mō kai pātea, Ngati apa ngā rauru, raised at the foothills of the majestic Maunga Ruapehu, been involved in tribal activities and leadership from a young age, former chair of the Maori Party, a partner in Naya. We will hear more about them. I have no doubt with charisma and Donna Flavel, experts in Maori development. Former chair, chief negotiator for his iwi Ngati Rangi, settling their claim. A director at Awhi, Atutahi Whanganui Incorporation. Chair of Te Reo o Whanganui, trustee on ngā tangata tiaki o Te Awa o Whanganui. Also on the Maori Advisory for Southern Cross Health and Te Kāhui Raronga Trust. And Che was also part of the first Te Hono group, is that right, brother?
Yeah.
And it was so good you went twice. But e te rangatira Che, tēnei au e mihi nei, o tira mātou, tēnei peka o Rangitikei, e mihi nei kia koe kia koko whaiwahi mai. Mo tēnei kōrero, mo te kaupapa Puanga. I was thinking, Che, when I got into this, I love Rangi Mātāmua and I love those kōrero. We know Rangi well, and he's done an amazing thing for Matariki. But as we know, there are kōrero for Puanga, and really, really keen to connect with you to understand the story of Puanga. What is it? Where is it? And some of the pūrākau and tikanga surrounding Puanga, because those of us at our end of Rangitikei River, we're connecting more with our whānau on the river. All of us as kaitiaki of that body of water. And part of that is obviously connecting our mātauranga. So tēnei au mihi nei kia koe te rangatira Che. Kai a koe.
Tēnā koe eiti. O tira, tēnā koutou i ngā wanaunga. Koutou o te reo reo. 80s said it all. But I suppose a bit more about my dad's side. And Dad's dad is Rangi Wilson, who's a brother to Para Iwiko. And so that's just a nice simple way of explaining how I connected to Te Reo. But yeah, from the Ihakara Te Raro line of Mōwhango, but of Mōkai Pātea, Otira, Rangitikei, and o ki tonu atu ki ngā pāpāringa I te mātāpuna o tō tātou moana o taupo. So, yeah, e mihi ana kia tātou. I suppose the first thing is who or what is Puanga? And she is one of the stars that's connected to Te Waka o Rangi. And Te Waka o Rangi is the waka that surfs above the heavens, or on the chest of Rangi Nui. And at the tauihu of the waka is Matariki, and at the taurapa, or the back of the waka, is Tautoru down the bottom and Puanga up the top. And so she's the taurapa of the waka. Tautoru is the kei, Matariki is the tauihu, and Matakaheru is the triangle in the middle, which is the sail. Her English name is Rigel, and you'll find that she is also one of the wives of Rehua, just like Matariki. What's really important is over the years, prior to Matariki getting a lot of attention in the last 2 or 3 years, is there seemed to have been a bit of a competition. Oh no, we're not Matariki, we're Puanga. Oh no, we're not Puanga, we're Matariki. And there's no competition. In my view.
Kia ora.
You read them for different things.
Right.
And I suppose in short, the reason why Whanganui and Taranaki, and I would probably say even other areas, definitely the upper Rangitikei, which is why the Mōwhango area is known as Te Reo Puanga.
Right.
And that's the name of the marae as well at Orua Matua, just below Mōwhango,
Yes.
below Whitikaupeka there, all our Hakupa families and that. The Mako Whare Mahihi, all of those lines, you've got Te Reo Puanga in the upper Rangitikei, and you've got Te Reo Puanga on the Onetapu.
Right.
And so basically it's all got to do with location. And I would say that most of the West Coast traditionally would have read Puanga simply because the impact on us, the impact of the Westerlies on us is stronger than once you go over the central divide of ranges.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so once you go over that from that Te Iwiroa, from the Tararua up to the Kaimanawa, once you go over the Iwiroa, you get a better read from Matariki. But on the western side of the Iwiroa,
You get a better read of Puanga.
well, Puanga gives you more clues because the westerly is so strong. It's the prevailing wind. It's the hokaka.
Yeah.
And so it's the prevailing wind. And publicly, but this is for my family, so publicly I'll just say Whanganui and Taranaki, but generally I'd actually argue that the West Coast, because the western side of Ngāpuhi, of Te Tai Tokerau, they're all Puanga.
Yeah.
The western side of Te Waipounamu, Puanga again. And so that just leads to the fact that, because you get a lot of us who will say that, oh, we acknowledge Puanga, not Matariki, because because we have the because you can't see Puanga. And traditionally for Whanganui, all of us would go into the middle reaches of the river in winter because it was the warmest place.
Right.
So we would descend from the mountain down into the river, and in the river valley, except for sometimes every third year, which aligns with Rangi's Ruha Nui kōrero, you can sometimes see Puanga every third year. But most of the valley you can't, and you can only see Puanga Matariki up on the mountain around Ohakune, Raitehi, Waioru, Taumarunui, and down in Whanganui City. But the light pollution doesn't help it there, so you've got to go up towards 4 down to get a good view. So it's not that you can't see Matariki, but the other point is what Uncle Tahu used to say, Rangitihi Tahu Pāroa, what Uncle Tahu used to say is ka ua ngā pua koe ako puanga. And so when the miro fruits through to the end of the running of the piharo, that's Puanga season.
Right.
And the key focus of Puanga season is getting those two forms of protein and turning your soil so that the cold weather can kill any bad bugs in your garden. So that when spring comes, you know, because we should be turning our soil right now in preparation for, well, at home for snow, but elsewhere frost, so that it kills any bad bugs and just makes gardening in the spring a lot easier.
Killed it.
So that's my high level overview is, and the other point on the river is because you can't see Puanga and our atua is the river. And when you're in the river, you go and pray to the river. You don't go up onto the hills. Only the tohunga would go up onto the heights to view the stars. The rest of us go to the river to karakia. And so because the river is our atua, then you're going there and you're invoking what you can see. And the only thing you can see is Puanga. So yeah, that's a basic. intro at least.
Well, no, it's an
Or
important,
cup
it's an
of tea.
important intro. So, Jay, in terms of any other tikanga or pūrākau you think that, you know, we should be thinking about or helping us on our puanga journey? How e te au te whakaaro?
Yeah, so what I like about what's happening with the Matariki movement is it's getting us to focus in on something that's Indigenous. And the narrative around remembering, reflecting, and I suppose re-emerging are really important narratives. So we remember our past, we remember our loved ones that have passed on. And below Puanga, there are 3 stars. Puanana or Puawana, and then the next one is Pikiarero, and the other one is Tahumate. Puawananga and Pikiarero are 2 clematis that show how fruitful your wānanga was that year.
Right.
So they come out in spring. Some say that they're the same plant, but my research tells me that they are actually different. 2 different plants, 2 different clematis. And then the third one, Tahumate, is for the ho-ho tree, just like over the river at Te Ho-Ho Road. So the ho-ho or the fofo paku or the puaho, it's all the same tree, just different names in different areas. And so the ho-ho is one of the plants that we use up home in the mountain because you can't grow kaukau because it's too cold and too high. And similarly in Taupo, you can't do it there either. And tahumate is the star for that plant. And so when I think of remembering, I think of tahumate. And I also think that through most of the year, Te Waka Orangi, which is the big star constellation that you see, it surfs the skies. And then from autumn, it starts to turn and starts to dive. And as it dives, and right now, if you go out right now, probably by the time this is screened, it's probably just starting to disappear. But you're currently only seeing Hine Takuru at the top, Puanga here, Tautoru here, and then another star, Pūtara, which is the star of Maru. And so you've got a house, you've got a whare. And whenever you see triangles in the sky, there's an opposite triangle as well. And that whare, I know it as Te Maruroa o Hine or Kuia Popo. And what happens is you've got Tautoru here, Hine Takurua there, or Takurua, Sirius, Orion's belt. And that's the front po of the house, the po kaiawha, where the kōrero is Hine Takurua, the po kaiawha is Tautoru, and the 2 amo are Puanga and Pūtara, or Te Whitu o Maru, so Maru. And quite significant in that form, because at that stage, when the waka turns and dives down, it creates a house. And that is the whare or the whata of Maru. And that's where you leave the mate to be suspended, similar to the kōrero about the kuping of Taramaia.
Yeah.
And so you place them on the whata until the rising of the waka orangi, where you invoke Atutahi to instruct Taramainaku to cast them up to become stars.
Okay.
So it's a slight difference. It's not too different, but the fact that Atutahi instructs Taramainaku to then cast them out. But because the waka has shifted and is then is diving down, it creates a house. and you have te whata nā maru. And so maru, generally you'll hear along the west coast is an atua who we offer our fish to, our first kai to, and all of that, rather than pangaroa. And so maru gets fed all of the time. And so you do a karakia for maru around the full moon of Haratua. And that's when you're telling the mate to get ready. And from that full moon of Haratua through to Oturu of Pipiri is where you're preparing the mate on the whata to get ready, so that Atutahi can then instruct Taramainuku post the big moon of Pipiri to then cast the mate to the heavens. So it's just a slight difference.
Yeah, yeah.
The important difference is the role of Atutahi.
Yes.
Who is also known as Pairangi. Ko Atutahi kei te pai o te rangi, koe oko Pairangi o te maungaroa. And so Pairangi o te maungaroa o Ikaroa, Mangoroa, and you'll see that name. You go to Tokanu and you see all of the street names. It'll tell you what they used to do around Tokanu.
Right.
There would have been an observatory platform somewhere. And so what you do is that you've got Atutahi's role there, and because Atutahi is the tohunga of the heavens, his role to instruct Taramainuku to cast the net is quite key, and that's the remembering. Reflecting is all about wānanga, and re-emerging is, kia hua te tau, kia nui te tau. And so you're invoking energy for an abundant year.
Wow.
And this is where it comes back to the reading. So the house comes into place before the big moon of Haratua. But from the big moon of Haratua through to at least Oturu, just before the big moon of Pipiri, is the best time to read Puanga. And depending on which way it flickers, will tell you whether it's going to be a good year, a wet year, a dry year. And even though you can take that read from Matariki, because of the impact of the westerly wind, that's why Puanga is so significant. And you've got a longer period to read it from. Whereas Matariki, you've got a shorter period to read it from. And so the Mātahi o te Tau is, you've only got up to almost 2 weeks to read. Whereas Puanga, you've got a longer read. And because of that impact of the westerly, right up to the iwiroa of the Ika, that's why Puanga is so significant.
Wow.
But once you've taken a cue on both, then, kia nui te tau, kia hua te tau, kia nui te tau. That's what you're asking for each year.
That's amazing. Che, we might come to a conclusion. This is really deep, meaningful. What kind of processes are you guys doing up your neck of the woods in terms of, Puanga / Matariki, festival, remembrance? What are the types of things you guys are doing?
Yeah, so what we've done for probably the last 11 years, I'd say 10 years, is we've made our ceremony more public. And so we use a Gregorian calendar for this simply because we're killing two birds with one stone. It's a pity they're not kiriru. And so from 1995, 96 eruptions, Uncle Matt and they decided, Uncle Matt, Mati Mārekura, they decided the olds back then that, well, every season before the mountain opens, we should have a karakia. And so, because Koro was talking to us during the eruptions and saying, hey, Everything's too focused in on the ski field. Don't forget me first. And so every year I had a karakia. It was a very intimate karakia, just with a few of our olds and some of one or a couple of the staff. And it was pre-season. And so the second Monday of June every year, we have a dawn ceremony now, which is now public, where we go up to Ruapehu. We have one karakia at one place to acknowledge the mana of the maunga, and then we walk over to a fire, and through the fire, once we all gathered around the fire, we carry on the ceremony, and we call out the names of our loved ones that have passed that year and send them up with the auahi. And then once we've done that, we welcome the new year, and then we have a hakari, or breakfast, in the bottom cafe there at Tiro Ski Fields. Awesome. And so we've been doing that for a while now, and so we use fire to do that. And then in the Tangaroa moon phase, the same ceremony of pipiri, the same ceremony is then completed at Putiki. So the mountain, so Kaiuta starts it, and it's then completed in the Tangaroa moon phase at Putiki, and the likes of Vini or Tamaho, and then we'll conduct that for us down there in town. And so ka kapi te wahanga ki ngā mate o te tau me ngā hua o te tau hou. And so those are the two public events. I've started to go back to acknowledging the big moon of Haratua as well, and then the which is autumn, and then the Tangaroa moons, and then the big moon of spring, and then the Tangaroa moon of summer as well, of Waru. And so there are 4 ceremonies that I acknowledge throughout the year, in the hope that we can then start to encourage, especially our mahi kai people, to call the different kai back. You know, so before the run of the kahawai or before the run of the kānai, you know, you assess when they would normally come, and then a couple of weeks beforehand, or on the right moon beforehand, you then call them to come back, so that we just make it part of our lives again.
Elder.
You know, because everybody's talking about food sovereignty. Well, this is food sovereignty.
It is Maori food sovereignty.
Maori food sovereignty, because at the moment we follow what's coming from America, and there's nothing wrong with that. But actually, we've got and it doesn't need to be a big karakia. You know, if I go and get a tuna, and I'm going to give it back, all my karakias, e kai e maru e.
Just like that. That's all.
Like that. It doesn't need to be hard. And like when I get my first harvest of any kai out of my garden, if it's raw kai, then I'll break it open, and I'll put a little, because I've got a little, just a really small little ahu in the corner of one of my gardens. And so I'll just place the kai there, just break it open if it's raw, and leave it on the ahu. If it needs to be cooked, then I'll just cook it with the rest of my kai, and then I'll open the window when it looks like it's nearly cooked. I'll just lift the lid up, go e kai e maru e, and then I'll take one piece out, just cut a little piece of my taiwa or whatever, and take a little piece out and put it on the ahu. It doesn't need to be a big thing. And sometimes we want to give a big this, a big that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's all about intention. And it can become part of our everyday lives again. you know, because some will want to separate that and, oh no, you do that separate and all of that. And yep, I get that. And in different ceremonies, I'll separate, but just in my everyday life, when I'm going out to get something and it's the first harvest of my broccoli, or, you know, and I'll just get a little bit of the broccoli, break it off once it's cooked, and then go and take that out.
I love it, Shay, because what you're talking about is bringing tikanga as part of our life, our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Not just the big hui or the piki, pakatau or tikanga or pohiri or whatever, but how do we introduce in our day-to-day lives? So maybe, hey, kōrero whakakapi, what would your advice be to people who are wanting to kind of have a little bit of a puanga wānanga, or, you know, connecting it to matariki? What's some advice or tips you might give to people?
There's a heap of information out there around matariki. There's a little bit of information about puanga, but you'll find on the Ngati Rangi website, myself and Rangi, it's on our Facebook page. Myself and Rangi did a kōrero probably at the beginning of the lockdowns. And Rangi and I do a taringa podcast on puanga and matariki. So there's that information there. And what I just encourage people to do is check your waiata. Check your waiata and check the karakia and check the place names. Because if there are place names that will guide you and tell you what's happening in your rohe. The other thing to do is just give it a go.
Kia ora.
Just give it a go and focus in on intention. Don't try and learn the big flash karakia unless you know how to do that. Use whatever karakia you might have, even if it's an awemeri, but you focus in on intention rather than trying to get the biggest flashes karakia, and give it a go.
Kia ora, Chai. Tēnei mātou o te riu o te reo, e mihi nei ki a koe, o tira koutou, ngā whanaunga, ki tērā taho te moana. Just a real big mihi and a shout out to you, Chief, and encouraging everybody to, this period of matariki, also making sure that we engage and connect in the kōrero about puanga. With all the resources, and we will check out the taringa podcast with you and with Rangi, but anything else we can find. Tēnei mātou, e mihi nei kia koe, o tira kia koutou, tēnā koutou, huri rauna, tēnā tātou. Thank you, brother.
Kia ora.